Practice, and then as you go into either your job search or your next duty station, anyone who will listen to you, I want you to take some time to practice your professional story. The more times we tell it, the better we get. And then I'm going to ask you the second step, which is to be a good listener. So instead, when we meet a military spouse, of saying something like, oh, what does your spouse do? What command is your spouse in? What duty station is your spouse in, or ship, or all the other ways that we introduce ourselves? I want you to think about how we can ask each other who we are and allow us to practice telling our own professional story. When you have this opportunity, I want you to think about a couple of things. I mentioned that chronology does not work for me, and it doesn't work for many military spouses because of things like gaps in our resume. So when we tell our story chronologically, they go on and on and on and on, and frankly, we don't get to the point of who we are. So think about other ways to tell it. You can tell your story thematically. For myself, professionally, I am a teacher. I have done a whole variety of different things, but at the heart and soul of who I am, it is teaching. So I've taught high school, I've taught in person, I've taught online. I've taught on sports fields as a coach. I've taught doctoral students who are working on their dissertation. I've taught stroller strides to new moms who have these brand new babies and want to get outside and get an exercise or get a workout in. And even with a nonprofit organization, shockingly, I found a way to be in front of you guys teaching a little bit today. So in my heart and soul, I am a teacher. And when I tell my story, I do it thematically based on this, core of who I am. That's one way to do it. The other thing that you can think about is what are your skills that set you apart? So if you don't have a theme that's run through your career, think about your skills. Are you an organizer? Are you a planner? Are you the person that 3 months before you've gotten to a duty station has already found your next job? That's a skill, and you could frame your entire story based on your skill. Listen to what other people say about you. If you're a little unsure of how to tell your story, think about those references. Think about what former employers have spoken to on your behalf. Think about how they regard you. And then think about what sets you apart. So we often see being a military spouse as our disadvantage. It's taken us, all the way around the world. It breaks up our resume. We start, we stop, we do all of these things. But if you flip that upside down and think of being a military spouse as your greatest asset, what do you bring to the table that somebody that is also applying for the same job does not have? And you could tell your story entirely based on who you are that sets you apart, that sets you differently. I believe we heard earlier that when we tell our story, we can talk about what our skills are, the fact that we are punctual, that we get there on time. You could tell your story in that way. And then, because we live in a new age, and probably not on a federal resume, I'm learning that there's a difference, but in a more corporate environment, resumes can adapt and can be more dynamic than they used to be. So you could think of telling your story visually. Think of the picture of standing in front of the Great Wall of China. And while you may not have been working while you were on this side of the world, think of what you've been able to see, and if you can work that into either your online presence or your branding or your story, however you tell that. We get to tell stories in a whole variety of different ways, so think about all the mediums that you have to tell your story. We do have the very traditional online resume, but we also have our LinkedIn profile, a really big opportunity for telling our story in a very subtle way. We have our Facebook page, we have Instagram, we have Twitter, and at least in my industry, people are looking at who we are online. So you have lots of different ways to tell your story. Now we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to craft our elevator pitch. But these ladies have done such a brilliant job because we're doing it for a reason. We're about to join a breakout session, and so you're going to have an opportunity to introduce yourself. You have probably about 20 to 30 seconds, so it's not very long. It is literally, that's where the elevator pitch comes from. It's the time that you can take in an elevator. You have about 20 or 30 seconds to put yourself together. So on your sheet of paper, you have some blank lines. I want you to think about the theme of your career or the skills that you have gathered, the ones that you're the most proud of, or that you think will help you take the next professional step, or what sets you apart from your peers. And I want you to craft a 2 to 3 sentence elevator pitch about yourself, so that when in the breakout session they ask who you are, you can answer that in the most advantageous and positive way. So I used to start with, I graduated in 1999, and I taught in 3 different schools in 3 different parts of our country because my husband was in training. So I used to start with, I started as a teacher in Atlanta, Georgia, and then I went to San Diego, California, and then I went to Jacksonville, Florida, and then I went into the nonprofit sector, and then we moved to Virginia, and I went into an independent school, and yada-dee. But now I actually weave teaching into it. So in my heart and in the theme of my career, I am a teacher and I'm a leader. I believe strongly in empowering and developing other people. So I've done that in a variety of different ways. And that's when I would then list the types of things that I've done. So instead of talking specifically about school names, I talk about brick and mortar schools and online teaching, because then I kind of cross both avenues. And I would talk about working in the for-profit and the nonprofit arena. So then again, I kind of cross both angles. I would talk about teaching for a program like Stroller Strides and running a franchise, and starting a nonprofit such as the Other Side of Service. But teaching would be how I would work it together. And we were talking earlier about our resumes and the different ways that we can craft our resumes or our stories. Sometimes we think that it has to be linear, but it by no means has to be linear. You put the job that's the most applicable to which one you're applying to, or the one that frankly you've gathered the most experience from that you want to self-promote at the top. And so in your story, you can go to your greatest asset first. And I guess I probably should have mentioned I have a doctorate in education as well, also teaching and leading. But that's probably what I should start with. That's probably my most strong asset, and then work down from there.